They slashed my salary, erased my title, and thought I'd fade quietly, but instead I became the woman they now report to. If you believe in quiet comebacks and legacy that can't be erased, subscribe to the channel because this is just the beginning. You're overpaid for what you do. That was the very first sentence he ever said to me. Not hello, not nice to meet you. Just that cold, flat, unapologetic. I blinked, smiled politely, and thanked him. Then I walked out of his office and began the quiet countdown he didn't know he'd just triggered. My name is Marla Jennings, and I was the head of people operations at Hayfield and Norton, a national consulting firm based in Seattle for 22 years. I'm 58 now, long enough in this game to know when a storm is coming and how to build a shelter before it hits. I wasn't flashy. I never sought the spotlight. But I knew the company better than the C-suite did. I was the person people came to when policies failed or when personalities clashed. I helped us weather the dot-com bust, the housing crash, and the pandemic. I guided 3 departments through reorganizations without mass layoffs. I created our retention model, one that cut employee churn by 45% in 5 years. I mentored 4 directors who now sit in executive roles, quietly, without credit, without needing it. Then came Reed Wallace, freshly appointed CEO in January 2023. He was 36, polished all buzzwords and blazers. His experience 2 tech-adjacent companies that burned out in under 2 years. But he had a connection on the board, and apparently that was enough. He didn't schedule introductions. He sent out a mass email titled Phase 1 Legacy Reset. By Friday, 7 long-tenured managers were gone. By Monday, he'd renamed every meeting room with one-word terms like momentum, clarity, and pulse. He didn't believe in handshakes, called them non-scalable gestures. When my assistant said I had a meeting with him, I dressed professionally, brought department performance reports, and planned to outline a roadmap for 2023. I walked in, sat down. He didn't look up. Marla Jennings, he said flatly. How long have you been here? 22 years this May, I answered. He chuckled dryly. Figures. Legacy salary. Then without a hint of hesitation, he said, You're overpaid for what you do. We're adjusting that by 30% effective next cycle. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I simply nodded. Understood. Because in that moment, something shifted. He thought he was cutting costs. What he'd actually done was cut loose the one person holding the foundation together, and I had no intention of warning him what that meant. Not yet, I smiled. I said, understood. Because something in his tone, his posture, his complete disregard for my presence told me this wasn't personal. Not really. It was worse than personal. To Reed Wallace, I wasn't even a person. I was a line item. A salary figure in column H of some cost-saving spreadsheet. An older woman, 58, quiet, not flashy, not loud, not disruptive. In his eyes, I was someone he could erase without ripple, without noise, without consequence. But here's what he didn't know. When you strip a woman like me of institutional loyalty, you don't create submission. You create clarity, and clarity is dangerous when paired with experience. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I didn't even call my closest friend in legal. I walked out of Reed's office, stepped into the 3rd-floor restroom, locked the door, and stood in front of the mirror. For nearly a full minute, I stared at my own reflection. Then I smiled. Not a bitter smile. Not even a smug one. It was the quiet, steady grin of someone who had just been given permission to stop protecting people who no longer deserved it. Reed made a costly mistake. He assumed women like me don't keep score. He didn't realize we started keeping score long before he even entered the game. The next few days were strategic. First, my office was quietly reassigned. No notice, no explanation. I came back from a meeting to find Brittany, a recent hire, sitting at my desk, organizing stationery like she'd been there for years. No nameplate, no apology. Just her smile and a dismissive, "Oh, didn't anyone tell you I'm the new executive assistant to the CEO? He wanted me nearby." I packed my things. No drama, no sigh. Just a quiet move to a cubicle near the break room next to the rattling heating vent and the microwave that sparked when it ran too long. Then came the calendar changes. My standing invitations to leadership meetings. Gone. The strategic calls and workforce planning sessions I once led were replaced with password resets, policy clarifications, and basic admin tasks I hadn't touched in 15 years. Meanwhile, Brittany shadowed me, allegedly, to learn the ropes. But it was clear she was there to monitor. She had access to everything: payroll compliance logs, hiring reports, and she clicked through it like a tourist holding a map upside down. They thought I was being phased out. I wasn't. I was preparing, quietly, thoroughly. And if Reed thought I was going down without leaving a mark, he had no idea who he'd just tried to erase. She called me Mother Marla in front of the interns once. Thought it was funny. I said nothing. Not because I was passive, but because I was watching. I saw her take screenshots of personnel files she didn't understand. I saw her fumble through benefit structures, forward confidential data to the wrong departments, and mislabel compliance deadlines in her notes. I watched Reed Wallace's cost-cutting scheme unfold like a flimsy playbook. I saw the turnover numbers climb. I saw the audit flags pile up in his inbox ignored. I noticed how he skimmed legal reports like they were optional reading. They thought I was fading into the background. I wasn't. I was documenting everything. If this story moved, you even just a little hit that subscribe button and stay with me. There's more to come, and trust me. The next chapter reveals what happens when quiet strength meets undeniable purpose. This isn't just about corporate injustice. It's about rising after being written off and showing the world what legacy truly looks like. If you've ever been underestimated, this channel is your space. Your voice belongs here. So subscribe, stay connected, and be part of a growing community that believes experience isn't something to retire. It's something to rise with. The next part of the story. You won't want to miss it. 15 minutes early. 20 minutes late. Every day. I backed up contracts and cross-referenced org charts, archived internal memos. I logged access history across HRIS and benefits platforms. I checked permission trails: who had touched what, when, and why. No one asked questions. I was still just Marla. That was their second miscalculation. While they were busy renaming conference rooms and slashing roles to look lean, I was quietly building the architecture for their unraveling, using the very systems I once designed to protect them. It was almost poetic. For 22 years, I'd been the invisible safety net, catching errors before they hit legal, smoothing egos, before they derailed projects, guiding people without fanfare. But now I wasn't the net. I was the thread. And when that thread was pulled, it wouldn't be subtle. It would be structural. All I needed was one final insult, and Reed delivered it. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. The clouds were low, like the sky itself was holding its breath. There was a surprise all-hands meeting, mandatory, no agenda, no reason given. Everyone shuffled into the main conference room. Quiet, uneasy. I knew. Reed stood at the head of the room in his usual performance stance, rolled sleeves, half grin. Brittany was by his side, tablet in hand, like she was holding sacred scrolls. "Thanks for joining," he said, smooth and smug. "As part of our top-down operational alignment, we've been evaluating which roles support our forward vision." He glanced at me. Not long, just enough. Some roles, he continued, are outdated in scope or no longer aligned with future objectives. There it was. The word. Outdated. He never said my name. He didn't have to. Everyone turned. And that moment, that was the match. They thought they'd fired a figurehead. They didn't realize they had just triggered the failsafe. Everyone in that room turned to me like it was choreographed. "This will be Marla's final week with us." Reed announced, his tone smooth and sterile. "We thank her for her years of service and wish her the best in her future endeavors." Just like that. No handshake, no acknowledgement of impact, not even a card with a forced signature from the interns. I was being erased in real time. I've handled hard things before, difficult terminations, crises, restructures, but this stung in a different way. The silence was heavy, stifling. No one made eye contact. People I had supported through family losses, nervous breakdowns, last-minute job relocations, they all looked at their shoes. too awkward, too afraid, too complicit. And yet, I felt free. Because in that moment, I no longer owed them anything. I stood, nodded once, and said, "It's been a privilege." Then I turned and walked out, measured, unshaken heels, clicking across the tile like punctuation on a chapter's final sentence. I didn't cry until I reached the stairwell. And it wasn't because of Reed. It wasn't even because of the insult. I cried because it was done. 22 years of loyalty erased in less than 2 minutes. How small, how deeply, bitterly small. But that moment, that was the pivot. Because I didn't just walk away from a job that morning. I walked away from a place that had stopped seeing me. And in doing so, I became invisible, but only to the people who thought visibility was the same as value. What they never understood is that control lives in silence. That night, I opened a private portal I'd built years earlier, intended originally as a contingency for natural disasters or executive mismanagement. Think of it like a digital dead man's switch. Within 48 hours, unless reauthorized, using dual credentials, access across HR systems, compliance portals, and admin dashboards would begin to time out. One of those credentials, mine and mine alone. Monica. My trusted lead in IT was still in place. She had already begun scrubbing metadata trails to detach my name from internal logs. Quietly, cleanly. Meanwhile, I drafted my final memo. Short, legal, unambiguous. Effective. Immediately, I withdraw all personal liability from structures, systems, and contracts developed under my direction. All permissions issued under my authority are hereby revoked unless renewed through mutual written agreement. Marla Jennings. Then I logged out for the final time. And waited, because they thought they'd removed me. But in reality, they'd just pulled the thread. An unraveling. That was about to begin. And I waited. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. First one message, then 5, then 22. Payroll access denied. Onboarding crashed. Compliance portal frozen. HR data unreadable. I forwarded each alert to my personal archive. Then I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, because the unraveling had begun. But this wasn't revenge. This was restoration. A system recalibrating after being poisoned. And the best part? They still had no idea what was happening, let alone why. It's remarkable how quickly things fall apart when leadership is built on ego, not understanding. By the end of that week, Hayfield and Norton was in full-blown crisis mode. Payroll froze. The HR portal displayed nothing but a 403 error screen. Employee benefit updates vanished mid-processing. Legal compliance reports gone. They cycled through explanations, software updates, third-party bugs, cloud errors, but every attempted fix only made things worse. Reed Wallace blamed the vendor. IT blamed the infrastructure. But the truth was simple. The system wasn't broken. It just no longer belonged to them. By the following Monday, resignation started rolling in. Quietly. Intentionally. 10 employees in total. No grand announcements. No gossip trail. Just carefully planned exits. Department heads. Senior HR partners. Payroll specialists. One by one, they slipped away like threads pulled from a finely stitched garment. And each one, someone I had once mentored. I watched it all unfold from the quiet corner of a sunlit office, not at Hayfield and Norton, but at Porter and Bright, a mid-sized consultancy based in Belltown that had quietly positioned itself as the next big name in values-driven strategy. Months before Reed had even been hired, Porter and Bright had approached me. They'd read my work, tracked my results, reached out to invite me into their vision of full cultural reinvention, people first. Back then, I declined, out of loyalty. Now, I said yes. But I didn't just bring my experience. I brought the blueprints, the frameworks, the redundancies, the audit trails, the systems that had made Hayfield and Norton resilient through recessions, mergers, and turnover waves. And more importantly, I brought the people, the ones Reed had called legacy, the ones he never bothered to know. We weren't rebuilding. We were rebirthing. While Hayfield and Norton hemorrhaged talent and scrambled to plug operational leaks with overpriced contractors, Porter and Bright stepped forward, steady, prepared, quietly formidable. Because the difference between a title and a leader isn't in how loud they speak, it's in what still works when they're gone. And then came the final twist. Porter and Bright acquired Hayfield and Norton's underperforming business systems division, the one Reed had gutted in his legacy reset. Publicly, the move was branded as a strategic portfolio enhancement. The press release talked about synergy, operational alignment, and innovation pipelines. But there was one small detail omitted from the media briefing. I had been placed in charge of the integration. That's right. 3 weeks after Reed Wallace fired me, I walked into a sleek glass conference room downtown to lead a transition meeting that he was now required to attend. The moment he saw me, absolutely priceless. He blinked twice, mouth slightly open, like a man who couldn't decide if he was in a bad dream or just waking up from the wrong one. And me? I smiled, calm, professional. I extended my hand and said, "Welcome to our systems alignment session, Mr. Wallace. I trust you reviewed the prep deck in full." He couldn't form a coherent sentence. Just a nod and a cough. Brittany wasn't with him. Word was, she'd been quietly dismissed over a compliance violation, something about unauthorized data transfers during her shadowing stint. I'd seen it coming a mile away. Honestly, the symmetry was almost too perfect. There he was. Reed, the man who told me I was overpaid and outdated, now sitting across the table, trying to decipher an infrastructure plan I had authored built inside a system he never bothered to understand. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My presence was enough. The integration moved forward under my leadership, on schedule, under budget, and without a single data breach. Meanwhile, Reed was assigned as an advisor to a task force with zero decision-making power. He wasn't leading anything. He was there for optics, benched, stripped of influence, and the same executives who had sat in silence during my exit. Now they waited for my sign-off, my guidance, my approval. It wasn't revenge. It was justice with rhythm. Poetic, really. Because when you erase someone without understanding their value, you don't just lose a person. You lose the structure they held together. Replace substance with flash, and you don't rise, you rot. Reed didn't last long. For a man who lived for control in titles, becoming a figurehead was like slow suffocation. His name stayed on a door for a while, but the door it led nowhere important. He missed meetings, stumbled through updates like a substitute reading someone else's lines. And the worst part, no one noticed. He was fading, quietly, just as he once tried to fade me. Oh, the irony. Poetic, wasn't it? Meanwhile, I did what I've always done, kept things moving. Under my leadership, the integration between Porter and Bright and the newly acquired Business Systems Division was completed 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Employee retention stabilized, project pipelines were restored. Cross-functional teams, once fractured by fear and poor communication, started working like clockwork again. And for the first time in months, the mood wasn't just functional. It was hopeful. People weren't just staying. They were showing up with energy, with purpose. It wasn't about me. It never really had been. But I wasn't invisible anymore either. And that mattered. One afternoon, while walking through the second-floor corridor, I passed the break room and spotted Reed Wallace, standing alone, staring blankly at the coffee machine, like he'd forgotten why he came. He looked smaller, like a man who had aged 10 years in 3 weeks. As I walked past, he turned. "Marla," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I paused. Of course. We stepped into an unoccupied office. No windows, no audience, just 2 people and the weight of everything unspoken. He didn't sit. He gripped the edge of the table with both hands, steadying himself. "I didn't see it," he said. "What you were doing, what you held together." I stayed silent. "I thought you were just legacy weight," he added, voice tight. "Just a name on a spreadsheet. I didn't know everything would fall apart." I tilted my head slightly. "Not unkindly, but you didn't ask, did you?" He looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And truthfully, I believed him. But that didn't mean it changed anything, because apologies don't rebuild collapsed infrastructure. They don't rehire the talent you let walk out the door. They don't restore the time and trust lost to arrogance and assumption. "I appreciate that," I said gently. "But this isn't about me anymore. It's about what comes next." He nodded, slowly, like someone finally realizing just how far off course they'd gone. For a moment, I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered the day he slashed my salary without warning, the way he smirked in that meeting, the day I returned from lunch to find Brittany sitting in my chair like she owned it. I remembered the silence in that conference room as I packed up 22 years of service. And just like that, the sympathy left me. Because growth doesn't always come from grace. Sometimes it rises from the ashes of your own erasure. Some people have to live the lesson before they truly learn it. That evening, I received a discreet message from the board. Reed Wallace would be transitioning out of his role entirely. The official language, voluntary resignation. But everyone in the know understood the truth. He was done. And the twist, he'd been offered a redeployment opportunity at one of Porter & Bright's remote service offices in a junior advisory role, reporting to someone half his age. Let that sink in. The same man who once said I was overpaid and outdated was now being offered a fraction of his former salary. To do almost nothing. Poetic justice served with a polished corporate smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't boast. But I did allow myself one small moment of quiet satisfaction. In my office, I opened the bottom drawer where I had kept the original notice from Reed, the one announcing my 30% pay cut. I read it one last time. Then I shredded it into thin, fluttering pieces and dropped them in the recycling bin. That chapter was finished. But the story, it wasn't just about Reed. It never was. It was about every woman who's ever been told she was too quiet to lead, too seasoned to grow, or too expensive to keep around. It was about proving without raising your voice that value isn't always loud, that stability isn't weakness, that legacy isn't liability. Legacy is the foundation others build from. And once you've rebuilt on solid ground, you don't just rise, you endure. After the dust settled, I didn't chase attention. There was no press release announcing my new position. No camera crew, no applause. And that was just fine with me. I didn't need a title to define my value, because I had already proven the most important truth: what I created could outlast me. At Porter & Bright, I officially stepped into the role of Chief People Officer. It wasn't just a promotion. It was an evolution of who I was, of what I believed, and of what I was ready to pass on. I didn't hoard power. I shared it. Each week, I opened quiet office hours, not for executives, but for those who rarely had a seat at the table. Assistants, interns, caregivers returning to work, mid-career professionals unsure of their next chapter. Because I knew what it was like to be invisible. And I made it my mission to ensure no one under my leadership ever felt that way again. That's when Second Bloom was born, a leadership circle for women over 40. And it was just getting started. The idea was simple. Legacy doesn't mean fading. It means finally flowering. And to my surprise, the first Second Bloom cohort filled up within days. Word spread across teams and industries. Applications poured in, women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, all looking for something that had been missing: space guidance and a voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. And something inside me shifted, softened, then bloomed too. One afternoon, I returned from a meeting to find a handwritten envelope on my desk. No return address, just my name in careful blue ink. It was from a junior associate in the finance department, someone I hadn't worked with directly. She wrote, "Thank you for showing me that quiet doesn't mean weak, that experience doesn't expire, that the people who hold things together deserve to be seen, not just used." I sat with that letter in my hands, blinking back tears, because that's what it had always been about. Not revenge, not recognition, not proving Reed or anyone else wrong. It was about creating space, helping others step into their worth without waiting for permission, And as for Reed last, I heard he took the reassignment and advisory role in a remote branch office in Flagstaff, Arizona. No assistant, no boardroom, just a nameplate and a very long list of regrets. I don't see him as a villain. I see him as a lesson. Some people try to rise by stepping on others, but the ones who truly last, they build platforms beneath them. That's what legacy really is. Not what you take with you. What you leave behind that keeps working long after you've stepped away. And I was ready. Ready to build. Ready to lift. Ready to hand over the reins one day, knowing the roots were strong. I used to think legacy was something engraved on retirement plaques or read aloud in company farewell speeches. But now, I know better. Legacy is quieter. It lives in the systems we build to protect others. It shows up in the leaders we lift, the people we mentor, and the dignity we defend, especially when no one's watching. It's in the intern who finally speaks up because someone listened. It's in the mother returning to work who no longer has to start over from zero. It's in the seasoned employee who realizes she's not past her prime. She's standing in it. That's the work I do now. And it's the work I'll do until the day I step away for good. Because sometimes the strongest thing we can do isn't staying silent. It's speaking softly, clearly, and without apology. But without apology. I don't think about Reed Wallace much these days. And when I do, it's not with anger. It's with clarity. He reminded me of something I had long forgotten in the rhythm of loyalty and habit. You don't have to stay somewhere just because you helped build it. You're allowed to walk away. And you can build again. Stronger, wiser, freer. And the best part? I didn't have to destroy anyone to reclaim my value. I simply removed myself and let gravity do the rest. What happened to Reed wasn't revenge. It was the natural consequence of unchecked arrogance. And what happened to me, that was growth. Now, when I walk into a room, I no longer carry the fear of being overlooked. I carry presence. And presence, it isn't earned through volume or titles. It's earned through clarity, through knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone shrink it to fit their comfort. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been dismissed, devalued, or quietly replaced by someone who never understood your worth? What did you do next? Did you stay silent? Did you question your own value? Or are you still holding on to the weight of that moment? If so, hear this. Your story isn't over. You are not invisible. And your worth, it's not defined by a title they gave you or a salary they slashed. It's defined by what you've built, by what still stands because you stood for it. So drop your story below, because someone out there might need to read it today. Someone who's standing where you once stood. Someone who's about to learn that their quiet strength was never weakness. It was foundation. And together, we build something they can't erase. Not because we shout louder, but because we last longer. That's legacy. And that's what I'm leaving behind. Not a name on a door, but a room full of people who know they belong in it because someone finally told them they do. I'll keep showing up, not for recognition, but because someone once made space for me. Now it's my turn. I didn't share this story for applause. I shared it because someone out there might be sitting in the same quiet corner I once did, undervalued, overlooked, or dismissed. And if that's you, I want you to know something: you're not alone. You don't need a title to validate your worth. You don't need permission to step into your next chapter. What you've built, the teams you supported, the systems you improved, the people you mentored, those things matter. Even if no one ever gave you credit, they wouldn't have held without you. And that means something. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been told you were too old, too quiet, or too expensive, leave me a comment below. Tell me what you're holding, or what you finally let go of. Tell me how you found your voice, or how you're still searching for it. I read every word. And so do others who need the reminder that quiet doesn't mean weak, and that experience doesn't expire. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Because we rise when we make space for each other. The truth is, I didn't get here by outshouting anyone. I got here by refusing to disappear. So if you're still showing up, still standing tall, despite it all, support this space by subscribing. Not for me, But for every woman who's still waiting for her chance to be seen, let's build something together. Something they can't erase. Marla.